From CoxHealth, please welcome Jim Anderson. And from the efactory, please welcome Rachel Anderson.
Hello, and thank you to Biz 417 for this opportunity and for putting a spotlight on the important topics and conversations today. It is very special for me to share that opportunity with my role model. To steal one of my dad's favorite lines, we both firmly believe we have the best jobs anywhere and are proud to live in and to work for our Queen City. Today we thought we'd take you into what the past 30 plus years at the Anderson family dinner table, or sometimes the living room, has looked like. We'll do this in a storytelling fashion and share the tipping points, milestones, game changers, and intentionality that went into and continue to make Springfield, Missouri the gold standard. These didn't happen overnight and certainly aren't the way things are everywhere. As you are all aware, Springfield has a lot of special things going on.
I also want to thank our friends at 417 for this special opportunity to share the stage with the director of the efactory, which also happens to be our oldest daughter, which makes it even more special, that honor and that privilege this afternoon. Do you remember when we moved to Springfield? Probably not, because you were 3 years old when that happened, back in 98, so I won't tell you the exact year and her age. But when we moved to this community back in the late 80s, there were really three challenges that confronted, I think, our community. Number one, Springfield, believe it or not, had a national reputation as being an avowed no-growth community. There was a national image, national reputation for Springfield, and that came about from a previous mayor and city council action. Number two, Springfield had a national reputation for horrible labor relations. There had been ugly strikes in our community in the 70s and the 80s. Those strikes had been violent. In fact, there were fatalities in those strikes. And that was a national image, a national reputation that we had. And a third reputation is that Springfield, I think, was viewed as an isolationist community, both in the region as well as statewide. So those were three pretty daunting challenges, it seems to me.
If you looked Springfield, Missouri up in the dictionary, besides being the birthplace of cashew chicken and Brad Pitt, you're also going to see something about collaboration. There's tremendous collaboration between the city, the county, and surrounding communities, including a lot of public-private partnerships.
Collaboration is, I think, our culture. It's the spirit of our region. It wasn't always that way, quite frankly. I think back in March of 1988, a group was formed called Community Leadership Forum. And literally every month, institutional leaders in our area get together. Every month to talk about issues, to collaborate on issues important for our community. And 31 years later, that organization, that group is still meeting on a monthly basis, which I think is a good example of collaboration that's occurring in our region. I think back to 1991, and for me that was a milestone because we started a public-private partnership in economic development, the partners being the city utilities, the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Springfield Business and Development Corporation, which is the economic development arm of the chamber. And I would tell you, it was very controversial. I literally was called a socialist at a city council meeting for advocating public-private partnership. Because prior to then, the public sector did its thing, the private sector did its thing, the twain should not meet. And public-private partnership was not part of the culture of our area. Literally, there was a public campaign to fire the city manager, to fire the general manager of city utilities, to fire me. Fortunately, that public campaign didn't work, but it gives you some idea of the level of controversy. An outgrowth of that was in 1993. Zenith Electronics Corporation announced they were closing their facility in Springfield. It made international news. Zenith was our largest manufacturing employer. They were one of our largest employers. It was the last domestic television production plant, and it was closing down, moving jobs to Mexico, and ultimately those jobs moved to South Korea. It literally made international news. Our community could have wrung its hands and said, woe is us, what are we going to do? But fortunately, that didn't happen. And the almost 2 million square feet of what used to be Zenith is now Sportsman's Park on East Kearney, the international headquarters of Bass Pro, and of course their distribution center. That used to be a manufacturing facility called Zenith. We also started Partnership Industrial Center along the northeast corridor of our community, along I-44 in '93. Some 22 manufacturers are now located there. And in fact, in 2001, we did Partnership Industrial Center West by the airport because Partnership Industrial Center had really maxed out in those 8 years. Another example, I think, of great collaboration is the community leadership visits. The very first one in '93, this will be the 26th community leadership visit, where we go to other communities to see what they have done, best practices, to see lessons learned. And I think back of some things that literally we brought back that have made a difference in our region. I think back of the Regional Economic Development Partnership. We call it Springfield Region Economic Partnership. Got the idea from Boise, Idaho on the first trip to Boise. The airport that we know today really was a vision we saw in Colorado Springs and really advanced the master plan of the airport probably by 20 years. And of course built the new terminal, now almost 10 years old. The Community Focus Report was a takeaway from Lexington, Kentucky. And a lot of the downtown redevelopment that's occurred over time is a takeaway from several community leadership visits. So just those are some memories, I think, from examples of collaboration.
Yeah, I got to go on my first community leadership visit this past year to Chattanooga, and some of the ideas and innovation leaders that we met with, we've already been able to implement some of those at the efactory. So really, really awesome programming. Another theme that relates to collaboration is advocacy. Walk us through some of the tipping points that put Springfield, Missouri on the map.
The advocacy piece has always had the focus on economic development public policy. Locally, I think back to campaign management. The very first campaign that the Chamber managed was back in '89. It was the initial capital improvement sales tax. It's been renewed 9 times since, and in fact the 10th renewal is up this April. And again, the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce will be managing that campaign. Another one that sticks out is in '98. We called it Recreate Springfield or Recreate Springfield. And it was a hotel motel tax increase which provided the seed capital for Jordan Valley Park, for Hammons Field, for the Ice Park, and for a lot of the downtown redevelopment. So that's another example, I think, of the local advocacy that sticks out in my mind. Literally, the Chamber's managed some 40 campaigns since 1989, and again, continues to do that. Another milestone, I think, occurred in 2000. I would tell you, from my perspective, and I think others, Springfield Public Schools was in trouble. People were not moving to Springfield because of declining schools. They were moving to the outside area. We had a Board of Education that was dysfunctional, just to be honest about it. We had members of that Board of Education who had special interests, who had agendas, and they weren't called kids. And the Chamber took a gutsy move to recruit and endorse candidates for the Board of Education. Both then and now, there's a handful of chambers in the country that does that. And there's nothing more important for workforce development and its future than having quality education. Gutsy move, I think, on local advocacy.
Definitely. Another theme that we can look at is the spirit and the culture of entrepreneurship that exists here in Springfield. There's been a lot of discussion about what Springfield's identity really is, and to me it's entrepreneurship. We're known for our work ethic, our ability to get the job done, and figure out how to truly make things happen. We're fortunate to have very influential and significant business leaders and companies in Springfield. Bass Pro, O'Reilly, BKD, SRC, all examples of companies that started here. When I worked in Los Angeles for a retained executive search firm, more affectionately known as a headhunting firm, the partners almost fell out of their chairs when they found out that I knew the father of open book management. It's very special to have the expertise that we have in our community and ability to work with and learn from so many great leaders. Oftentimes, because of our modesty, or if you want to call it being Midwestern nice, this becomes routine or overlooked. You don't have to be headquartered in New York or Los Angeles to be the best at what you do. Thanks to technology and infrastructure, we have the ability to choose where we want to live and do what we love to do. Credibility no longer comes from location, and it took me moving to Los Angeles and thousands of dollars, chasing what I thought was better access to people that were changing the world, and in reality, that access and ability is right here in Springfield. It's a lot harder to start a company in a large city. It's a bigger struggle with the logistics, the money, the lack of relationships, the infrastructure. And in Springfield, that truly is a reality.
We've had the opportunity to showcase that entrepreneurship with some statewide advocacy. A good example of that, I think, is the salute to legislators. In fact, that will be just next week in Jefferson City. Some 10 organizations comprising the Springfield Metro Partnership make that happen. There's monthly legislative breakfast, again sponsored by Springfield Metro Partnership. Years ago, formed the Major Metro Chamber Partnership. Probably not widely known, but St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield Chambers. Volunteer leaders, staff leadership get together 3 times a year to look at statewide public policy issues as it relates to economic development. A constant presence in Jefferson City. We're blessed to have, obviously, the governor, the Speaker of the House, the minority leader in the House from 417 land. We've heard from them today, and how blessed we are to have that level of leadership in our community. The other thing that I've noticed over time is our area legislative delegation thinks much more today in terms of regional, in terms of their legislative lens. It's not just for their district, it's not just for their constituents, it's also what's good for our entire region, and that's important. And that leads, I think, to the culture and the spirit of entrepreneurship. But there still seems to be sort of a paradox in my mind. We are so entrepreneurial as a region, except when it comes to public policy issues and projects. It seems like we want them to be certain, we want them to be absolutely guaranteed. Well, it's good enough, we don't need anything better, it's good enough, it's all right. Sometimes I think we Springfield it to death in terms of trying to find all of the reasons why it won't work before we embrace entrepreneurship as it relates to public sector. Another theme we obviously want to talk about is innovation. I know you have obviously a good take on that.
Yeah, and I really feel that innovation exists because of the other themes that we talked about. So collaboration, advocacy, entrepreneurship. We're extremely fortunate to have such strong institutions of higher education in our community. Truly, the jewel and the crown of economic development is higher education. Sometimes innovation happens because we aren't a Kansas City and we aren't a St. Louis, and we have to be creative to be able to bring these opportunities and these resources here to our community. One example is the Idea Commons project that's come up today. Although you're hearing more about it now, and with the expansion and what's going to take place over the next few years, this is something that community and business leaders really started to develop 15 plus years ago. It takes that big, bold leadership, that visionary leader to make it happen. I know it sounds self-serving, but it's something I interact with every day, so I want to give you an example. The efactory is looked at as a national model. There are very few public institutions that do what we do. The fact that we have a public university working with startups, with business owners, with local, state, and federal government, not to mention public schools, is unique. It's unique to Springfield, it's unique to everywhere in the United States, and these partnerships don't exist elsewhere. Coming up at the end of the month is our 4th annual CoxHealth Innovation Accelerator. This happened because a few of us got together and said, what if? What if we got together and figured out how we can have process improvements? What if we can look at how we can change things that take place in a regulated environment? How can we make CoxHealth better? How can we make Springfield better? And how can we make healthcare for our region better? And I'm happy to announce that they've already invested over $1 million to make some of these new technologies and ideas happen, and it's things that you've seen in the press over the past few years, and those are things that are helping each and every one of us. So 2 years ago, we also started getting innovation leaders together from larger established companies to share ideas. And this group is now known as the Springfield Entrepreneurial and Innovation Network. This is just a way that we can get peer groups or innovation leaders together to start thinking about what if. Springfield is the right-sized community where what if truly is possible.
Sometimes I think we don't celebrate successes nearly enough. And there are times I think we are jealous of our neighbor's success. Instead of rejoicing and celebrating with our neighbor on his or her success, sometimes we have that jealousy. And I think we need to certainly overcome that in terms of growing and developing more as a community. Well, we certainly believe that a better community starts with lifting a hand, not pointing a finger, and that community building is not a spectator sport. And I'm always reminded that some people see things as they are and say, why? Others dream things that never were and say, why not? There's several why nots for us, but I'd focus on just three as we start closing out. Number one, we need to be more of a welcoming community. We've made great progress in that area, but we need more commitment to embrace diversity and inclusion. We need more competitive wages and salaries. We're still significantly below the state and national average in salaries and wages. There's nothing that would improve the economy greater than rising personal income. And we need to be focused, I think, on more competitive wages and salaries. And finally, I think we need more women and more young professionals in leadership positions in our communities and certainly in our businesses. Again, there's a lot of dreams that could be accomplished, but those are three certainly that we look for as opportunities for the future.
Success breeds complacency. Some communities react to change. We need to create change. Unfortunately, we sometimes think what's good enough for Springfield is good enough. When you know better, we have to do better. If you want things to happen, you have to make it happen. Create change. Leadership and vision isn't comfortable. Do something every day that gets you out of your comfort zone. You're going to relate to more people and have a better understanding of where they're coming from. Sometimes these big issues like discrimination, poverty, sexism, they seem so big they become paralyzing because we don't know what we can do to actually make a difference. Instead of do nothing, do the one thing that you can do every day and keep doing it. So maybe today when we go get some drinks and talk at Drink Summit here in a few minutes, it's meeting somebody new that maybe isn't talking to somebody else. On the way out, it's holding the door open for them. But choose to do something. If you find yourself talking a lot but not seeing results, it's time to make it happen. Look in the mirror, don't wait for somebody else to do it. Not everything has to go through a focus group, 2 subcommittees, 3 boards, and then take 5 years to come up with an implementation plan. You don't have to Springfield it to death. Take risk, be bold, be intentional, create change. Thank you, guys.